Welcome to Disc with Adam White. This is another Sci-Fi July. Today is Half Past Human by T.J. Bass. Let me read what it says here. Tinker was a good citizen of the hive, a model worker, but when he was allowed sexual activation, he found Mu Ren, who, like him, harbored forbidden genes, and so he began the cataclysm. But in a world where half-wild humans are hunted for sport and food, can anyone overthrow the hive? Greater by far than its stunted, pink-blooded citizens, the hive is more than prepared to rise and crush anyone who challenges its supremacy. Uh, that's kind of a very brief description of what this book is about. I don't even really know where to start with this book. If you're familiar at all with comics, and I've discussed Grant Morrison before, and this guy must have been somebody he was reincarnated from, because this read like a book that Grant Morrison would write. Uh, the interesting thing, though, is that, I mean, with all the technology that they talk about and the way it describes things, you would think it was written today, but it was actually from 1971. So, in a lot of ways, it was really way ahead of its time because there was a lot of stuff that just you would expect to read out of something written today and not 50 years ago. Uh, it was a book, not just Tinker. It says Tinker is the main character, but he's one of the main characters. He and Mu Ren have a relationship, and they have to decide whether they want to give up their child or move to the outside. Everybody lives in underground silos that are like cities, and the outside, you they never really say it, but you kind of get the idea that it's the environment's kind of shot because they're always talking about how the sun will warp your skin, and so that's why everybody lives underground, except, and they're called Nebushes, and they all have four toes. They make that distinction all the time. They have four toes, and the people that are left of the human race are the five toads who live in the outside. Now, I'm not giving anything away telling you that. Believe me, I could probably read the last 10 pages to you and it wouldn't give away anything because it's really kind of strange. You also have people that are hunters. You have Val and Walter who work to hunt the humans and the Nebushes who escape to the outside. They have hunting parties that go with their hunting ships that they have, and they go after and try to do, they raise like certain crops that are just made for calories because people eat based on calories, not what you really need to survive, because the Nebushes are like 4 feet tall. They're not really human anymore. They've just evolved from humans because there's like 3 trillion of them, and they live underground, and that's how they've adapted to live in this future society. Uh, the kind of government, the Earth Society that runs the place, tells them how many they can have in each family unit, and gives them, they work for their allotment of calories that they get from a dispenser, which kind of reminded me of the what do you call them? The food things on Star Trek where they just order anything they want out of them. Uh, for the life of me, I can't think of what they're called right now, but uh, they get stuff from that, and it's all based on calorie intake. And I'll tell you right now, there's no, you don't really get a sense throughout. Sometimes you think certain people are the good guys and certain people are the bad guys, but then it switches on you. And then nobody's really a bad guy, or somebody might seem like a good guy, but then seem like a bad guy, but then seem like a good guy again. So you just, there's not really a regular good guy, bad guy structure in this. You kind of have the society government as the bad guy, but they're run by a computer basically. And so that's kind of the main bad guy, I guess you'd say. I could tell you just about anything about this and it wouldn't ruin it for you because you just have to read it to understand it. And I felt like I needed to have dictionary.com open on my computer the whole time I read this, and I needed an advanced college chemistry textbook to look up stuff as I went because it was really that involved. It was mind bending. I mean, literally. It just really warped expectations of what I did. Now, it's got a sequel called The God Whale, which is supposed to be even better than this one, Half Past Human. And I was going to read them both and do this video on both of them. But after reading this one, I've got to have a break and read something else. Uh, I'm not saying I disliked it because I didn't. I liked it, but it's one of those books that you have to really work for it. It's not an easy read. So if you're looking to be challenged a little bit, like I mentioned it in an earlier video about China Miéville's books, you kind of got to work a little bit for it, but it's worth it when you do. Like I said, you just kind of felt like you needed dictionary.com on your uh, on your lap, on your computer, on your laptop while you were sitting here reading this book. I read it on Kindle, and another thing is it just kind of, each chapter was like an hour or more long, and I wish it would have been split into smaller chapters because that I think would have helped with some of the confusion. But it just switched back and forth randomly between characters without any, you know, how they usually have a little gap in the text. Maybe that's just because it was the Kindle version and it wasn't formatted correctly. But I mean, you might have two paragraphs about one character and then all of a sudden you were reading about another character. So that was a little bit confusing at times. There we go. But, and they just got into really involved chemistry and science, and it kind of left you really having to think about it. I did honestly like this book. I did have some issues with it. Like I say, there was some clarity issues, and it really was a complicated read. But I like being challenged by books. I think some books should challenge you to read. I mean, it's fun to read a story and just get lost in it uh, and just have an easy read. A lot of the westerns for the June on the Range were like that. They were really easy reads, which is nice because you can get your story from them, you enjoy them, and you can move on. This one you have to work for, and it leaves you really thinking about it when you're done because of the way that it ends up and how you have to think about all the characters and think about how you really feel about each one because it was just really strange. So if you'd like to enter the multiverse of madness, definitely read this book. It's, like I said, challenging, but I think maybe you'll like it if you like to be challenged by books. If you don't like to read something that challenges you, then you definitely don't want to read this book, because it's very strange. And like I said, I think ahead of its time. It was shortlisted for the Nebula Award, and it really was different from anything being written at the time. And like I said, it really feels like it was written out of present day instead of 1971. So, I mean, it holds up very well. It's not like when they find lost civilizations of humans on Venus or something like that. It's a really, it really holds up today as a science fiction book. And I think that I liked it. That's the best I can give you. Uh, I just finished reading it, and yeah, I'm really going to be thinking about this for days and maybe a month afterwards. And like I said, I want to read the sequel, The God Whale, but I'm going to have to put that off a little bit because I need to read something a little bit easier to get through. Uh, but it's definitely a challenging book, but it's worth the read. So if you like to be challenged, read it. If you don't like to be challenged, you probably want to stay away from this one. But hopefully you found something of clarity in that discussion about this. But I hope that maybe you'll give it a shot and challenge yourself. And I appreciate you hanging out with me this week. And I will see you guys next week.